everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Pete Bercich's Vikings Mail Call. I'm Tom Moore from VikeFans.com, and Pete, after thinking we'd spend our time talking about the undefeated Minnesota Vikings and their home opener this weekend against the New England Patriots, instead we have news out of Texas today about the indictment of running back Adrian Peterson, alleging he injured a child when he disciplined his 4-year-old son with a switch. And now, within the past hour, the Vikings announced that Peterson has been deactivated and will not play on Sunday. Pete, what are your reactions to this breaking story?
When I first heard it, I didn't believe it. Now that things have come out and some of the circumstances have come out and the indictments come out, and then the Vikings have officially announced, they did it about an hour and a half ago or so, a couple hours ago, that he's not going to be suited up for the game. And so it's all real. And, in cases like this, you have your initial reaction to what he's been indicted for. And it just makes your stomach churn. It's something that it's just tough to imagine. It's tough to comprehend. It's tough to think about. But at the same time, you have to go by the facts. And hopefully what's being reported are the facts and the circumstances of what went on and what happened. And these kinds of things, they need to play out in the court of law. People talk about the timing of the league and, with the Ray Rice thing. And what's crazy to me is Ray Rice wasn't even indicted for anything. He wasn't even arrested. He was let go. Mm-hmm. So you try to make heads or tails of all this. In fact, my son and I talked earlier, and he's met Adrian, and he's been around him. And Adrian has always stopped and spent some time with me and my son. And, I'm who am I? I'm just a guy on the radio. But it's hard to comprehend. And it's hard to comprehend on so many levels. It's a sick feeling. And again, you sit back and you think, and you have to wait until the justice system and everything else has run its course before, you really know what's happened. So, and that's what's so odd about the Ray Rice thing. I'm not saying he didn't get justice. I'm not commenting on any of those levels. I'm just saying is that it was not at all a legal issue. It was not anything that he had to go to court over, anything, until the video came out. And once people saw that, it just changed everything. The visual of what happened changed everything. And I don't know. So what do? You can't make heads or tails of it. You just, I don't know. You just, it's like these poor guys in the locker room. You just got to carry on. So the teammates, they still have a job to do, and they got to do it. But my goodness, it's everybody has to be just feel the same way I do, because a lot of them have kids too. You don't even have to have kids to sit there and be nauseated by the thought of what went on. But it's not clear. It's not black or white. This is a huge gray area. And I guess, emotions come through, and these things are emotional, and you just have to sit back and I guess let justice take its course.
Well, you mentioned the guys in the locker room, and, it's always that old motto of you got to be ready for next man up. But in something like this happens, especially so close to the game, how hard is it for the locker room to kind of turn on a dime and adjust and get used to the fact that really their marquee player is not going to be there?
I think that under the circumstances, this is not the first time that the bell cow, if you will, or the marquee player is going to miss a game unexpectedly. It happens, and it's happened before. It could be injury. It could be a lot of different things, I guess. But in a situation like this, I think the fact of what he was indicted for is going to carry more of a burden for the teammates than the fact that he's not there. I hope that makes sense. Because as a teammate, I think of all the stuff that's going on, one of the things that I love most about the locker room, and people will tell you, and I talked to Randall McDaniel last Sunday night, and one of the things we both talked about was how the locker room is a place where it's one of, if not the least racial places you'll be, because everybody is there that they depend on each other. You trust the guy next to you, because you're not putting life or death in their hands, but you're putting your well-being and your career in the hands of the guys around you, because it's still a team game. And so you don't concentrate necessarily on where they're from, what they look like, all those kinds of things. What you're concerned about is whether or not this guy's going to take care of his business and be a good teammate. when these guys look at Adrian, obviously they see a great teammate. They see a guy who works his rear end up. They see all these things that are so unique and different about him. And then to listen to what he was accused of, it's got to rattle someone to their core a little bit. And that's the kind of thing that's concerning, is that those guys are not just missing Adrian on game day. It's what he did to remove himself from the game and trying to digest all that. And that could easily be a distraction. It will be a distraction. I don't see how it can't be. And you think of Coach Zimmer and what he's trying to do, and the obstacles, and if you're a head coach, and I still think this way. I'm like, well, if I was in his shoes, what would I say? What would I do? Would you just comment and say, let the legal system take its course? We can't control it. Or, do you take it as an opportunity to educate, or, what do you do? And then I guess that's kind of a gut feeling, and he's going to have to figure that out before Saturday night when they have their night meetings before they go to bed on Saturday night at the hotel.
Yeah, absolutely. And, of course, Peterson's already in his testimony admitted that he used a switch on his son. But if he's found not guilty on the charges, with all of the pressure right now in the NFL offices and Roger Goodell, is there still a chance he would be suspended a minimum of 6 games into this new no-tolerance policy of the NFL for domestic abuse? Again, if he's found not guilty.
That's interesting, because if you look at what happened with Ray Rice, he wasn't found guilty of anything legally. He was suspended for 6 games for what he had done. And in this case, the commissioner, he's had a rough week, right? And you sit here and look at this situation. Well, what do you do now? Really, what do you do now?
Right.
Because it was, once you saw that film, it was black and white. It's like, that guy should be done. Once you saw the film of Ray Rice, you're looking at it going, okay, that guy should be done. He's done. And then you look at it and say, well, again, I keep saying he was not convicted of anything. He was not charged with anything. He was let go. So the no-tolerance policy will have to apply to this situation. Even if the guy's found innocent. And that's the thing that you have to face now. Again, take yourself, step back from the emotion a minute and think about it and say, what does the league do now that they've already suspended someone who wasn't charged with anything? And if Adrian Peterson is, let's say, found innocent, or somebody else is accused of something and is found innocent, what do you do? I guess if it is no tolerance, it is no tolerance. Then if that's the case, then an accusal or a picture or something like that could get someone suspended for 6 games. And, it's a mess. It's really... Goodell, he's going to earn his money, and he's got to figure this out, and, it's going to be interesting to see what side of the equation he falls on. And by that, is he going to, go with what popular opinion thinks? Is he going to go with what's best for the players or what's best for the owners? It's a mess.
Yeah.
It's a mess.
Well, I'm definitely glad I'm not him. And obviously, Pete, we're going to have to wait to see, like everyone else does, to see how this plays out. So let's turn our attention onto the field for the action now and talk about some positive things where the Vikings are undefeated under new coach Mike Zimmer. And you were there to see it live in St. Louis. What were your impressions of the Vikings' performance in that 34-6 thrashing in St. Louis?
They played a complete game, which was nice, and they hadn't done that in a long time. They hadn't won on the road since December 23rd of 2012. They took advantage of a quarterback who had never taken any NFL snaps with the Harrison Smith interception for a touchdown. Cordero Patterson obviously had an explosive game and did some great things, but getting a chance to watch some of the film back on Harrison Smith's interception, Anthony Barr was ready to plant the quarterback on his back. And the Cordero Patterson run, he received such good blocking from his tight ends that there was a corridor there. He didn't get touched, and no one came near him for about 12 yards. Now, granted, he did the rest, for the rest of the 64-yard run. But you see 10 guys doing their job, and then one guy gets to make a special play. It's something I talk about even with my youngest son, who's a 5th grader, and I tell those guys that. I'm like, when someone makes a great play, get excited, because it takes 11 guys for one guy to make it takes 10 other guys for one guy to make a great play. And so that's kind of what I take away from it, is that you're not seeing efforts just by Harrison Smith or a heroic effort just by Cordero Patterson. He has Red Ellison blocking for him and Kyle Rudolph blocking for him and all these people up front Fusco pulling out on the outside and kicking out the corner. I mean, there are 10 other guys out there who did their jobs perfectly, so that those two guys can show up and succeed and make great plays. And that's what's exciting to me. It's not like one guy just went out and played out of his mind. It's really the 11 guys on offense and defense stepping up and doing a great job.
Yeah, well, obviously that defense with 5 sacks and a couple of interceptions, they looked much more aggressive than last year's squad. And, of course, Viking fans, after they see a win like that, they're already making reservations for the desert for the Super Bowl. But from your opinion, not to rain on their parade, Pete, but how much of that success was due to the improvement on defense as opposed to a pretty anemic Ram offense?
Well, when you walk away from that game, when you look at, Sean Hill, and I know Sean very well. We drafted him, and he played for us. He played for San Francisco. He played in Detroit. I know Sean pretty well. He's a good quarterback. And it's a situation when you step back, you go, we beat a team that wasn't as good as we are, which means we're better maybe than what we thought, because at 5-11-1, you're not better than too many teams. But you did what a good team does to a team that's struggling. Obviously, they're struggling with injuries. Jake Long hurt his leg. He was out. Quarterback, you're in the third string. When you play a team that's on the ropes like that, like the Rams, you beat them. And you beat them handily, and you beat them just like the Vikings did. That's what good, solid teams do. Like I said, the teams that are struggling. So that part of it is exciting. And part of it makes you get more excited about the season. Not like they're going to go to the Super Bowl because they beat the Rams, but, let's face it, they were 3-point underdogs going into this game. And, they come out with a big win, and they did exactly what a good team should do. So we'll find out. You look at the schedule. You play New England, and then you got to go down to New Orleans and play. Then you got to play Atlanta, and then you play Green Bay, and then you play Detroit. I'm not sure if that's the exact order, but the next 5 games are going to be huge. And if you can get out of these first 5 games at 3-2, then you may have something going there.
So what you're telling me, at least for now, I should leave those reservations to the Motel 6 in place in Arizona.
Well, you know what? Here's the thing: if you're going to do that today, just make sure you're going because you want to see a Super Bowl, not because you think the Vikings are going to be in the Super Bowl. It's an experience second to none. So if you want to go, then go. Don't go because you think just because the Vikings are going to be there. Although a guy like, if I had a pocketbook like yours, I probably would be going anyway.
Well, there you go.
That's a whole other interview right there.
I hear you. Well, when we talk about that defense, where a big difference I saw was on the line, especially at defensive tackle. And last year, the 2 starters in Williams and Guyon, they only had 27 solo tackles the whole year, while Linval Joseph and Sharif Floyd had 11 all by themselves in just one game. What did you see in what they were doing that made them so successful on Sunday?
Well, I think it starts with fundamentals. I think that's it. You're getting a lot more production out of Sharif Floyd. I wasn't too impressed with his production last year. And then you sit back and you look at a guy like Sharif Floyd, who's extremely talented, physically gifted, or else he would not have been drafted as highly as he was. But the staff, Coach Patterson, who was a D-line coach when I was playing with the Vikings, they're getting productivity out of guys, out of everyone. The defense had 19 different defenders that made tackles. And that stood out to me because you've got 19 guys now that are involved in the game plan, who are active in the game plan. So when you sit down and watch that film on Monday, you've got 19 guys that were graded, maybe more, because somebody might have gotten in and didn't make a tackle. But Wednesday when you show up and that game plan comes out, are you paying attention? Hell yeah, you're paying attention. You're paying more attention because you actually might be in it. You know what I'm saying? You're involved in it. That's how you get people to buy into a system. That's how you get people to buy into what you're doing. And the fact that they could put that many different guys on the field and get productivity from them, I think speaks a lot for the coaching staff. I'm very impressed with what Zimmer's done and with what North Turner's done. And that's another thing walking away, saying, what I thought I saw in the preseason with attention to detail, good fundamental football, guys being at the right place at the right time. You watch Viking games in the past, and it was always catch, guy runs, tackle, maybe stop them before they get the first down when it's 3rd and 8. Well, that's not happening anymore. It's tight coverage now. People are challenging people. As a defender, when you just sit back and then have to rally and make tackles, that gets old after a while. Mentally, that grinds on you a bit. every once in a while you want to pin your ears back and challenge somebody. And, with how they're, technically, I don't want to get into too much what they're doing, because the system that they're running, they're allowing their players to make plays and be more aggressive and be in position to make plays because they're studying the game plan. It's a much more of a mental load that they have to carry week in and week out. A lot more teaching involved, a lot more everything that's involved. But if you can do it, and you have players that are smart enough and willing to take the coaching, then you're going to get more productivity out of more people.
Yeah, and you talk about watching the coaching film, and, as a former linebackers coach and seeing that film, how did you grade rookie Anthony Barr's first game? What did he do well, and where do you think he needs work?
Well, I didn't get a chance to see the whole game, so I won't want to grade him on everything. However, one play stood out, and that was a screen that was run to the Rams bench side, and there were two offensive linemen in space. It was just like a wedge and a kickoff return. And Anthony Barr just split the wedge. I mean, he busted it in half. And then later on, against the Rams fullback, he ran, they were running an ISO play, which means the fullback runs right through the line. I mean, you stand there as a linebacker, the line opens up like the Red Sea, and then you have this fullback coming downhill at you, and it's just you versus him. I mean, it's football 101. And Anthony Barr hit him so hard that the fullback went right to his knee. So here's a guy who's 6'5". We know how big he is and how fast he is. Normally those guys are not very physical. I remember Derek Johnson, when he came out of Texas, he was probably one of the least physical linebackers I've ever seen on tape. And I was just absolutely surprised how productive he was in college when he never hit anybody. I mean, he hit nobody. And he went out of his way to not get hit by people or to hit people because he uses athleticism so he could run around people. Anthony Barr is not interested in running around people. I mean, he's out there lighting people up. I think, he may have a ways to go from a technique standpoint, pass rushing against true offensive linemen. I mean, that's a gift. But, I mean, I stood next to him before the plane, around the plane on a tarmac, and look, he's an enormous man. And I'm just amazed that he can even play linebacker. He's so tall. I just don't know how he can bend to get under people's pads and hit like he does. Normally guys that are that tall and lanky struggle with those kinds of things, and he brings it. And I love the physicality. I think the physicality is fantastic, and that's what impressed me, I think, most about him in that game. Just to sum it all up, was he was physical. Well, guys who don't know where they're going or guys who don't know what they're doing, they're not physical. And Anthony Barr was out there, pounding people, so it was good to see.
Absolutely, and as you look on the other side of the ball, the game was really never in doubt last Sunday, but it seemed the offensive game plan was pretty conservative in St. Louis. Did that surprise you, and where do you think Norv's rumored deep passing game was last week?
Well, Norv, I think, spoke to it during the week, and he said that he kind of used the old discretion as a better part of valor, that we had plays called that were deep shots, and, due to the look they got on defense or whatever, they didn't run them or they didn't call them or they checked out of them. Now, some people would say that's, just being prudent, and some other people would say you can't let the defense dictate what you want to do on offense. There's a fine line there. But we know Norv, and we know what he's going to want to do, and the bottom line is that if you can get a 64-yard touchdown play from a bomb or a handoff, you would prefer the handoff every single time. It's just such a less risky play. So few things can go wrong on a handoff. And when you can get those explosive plays out of Cordero Patterson coming out of the backfield, well, by all means, keep running them.
Sure. Absolutely. Well, Pete, the Vikings officially open up the 2-year commitment to TCF Bank Stadium this weekend when they host the New England Patriots. What problems do the Patriots present for Minnesota, and how would you expect the Vikings to counteract that, both on offense and defense, to get a home win?
Well, I think, with the way New England sits right now, it's so much of it just starts and stops with Brady. He has a calf injury. He's not going to be, he's not a very mobile guy to begin with, and he'll even be less mobile. But he beats you by what goes on between his ears. I mean, he can diagnose just like Rodgers can do in Green Bay. I mean, he can see what's going on and know what to do with the football, so he doesn't have to hold on to it long enough for a D-lineman to get there. I mean, if your offense is set up in a way, it's almost impossible to get to a quarterback even when you're unblocked because the ball gets out so quickly. I would think that they're going to have to go to something like that, and they're going to have to find a way to run the football effectively because, again, younger linemen, not great pass blockers. If you just throw the ball 80% of the time, these guys are going to get destroyed. You got to be going forward. You got to have a balance. So I think you're going to see a more balanced game plan, offensively, and then defensively, they got to find a way to stop the run. I mean, Noshan Moreno, who everyone looked at and thought he was a product of the Denver system, comes out and hangs 130-some yards on him and a touchdown. I think Noshan Moreno, again, is probably a little better than people gave credit for, and the Pats' running defense probably isn't that bad. But it isn't. You just can't assume you're going to be able to make hay on the ground with these guys. For New England, it's imperative that you early get them. If you can, get up on them, let them know that there's a bigger problem going on, that it wasn't just a one-game aberration, that they have serious problems, and they may start thinking twice. Brady won't. He's been around this league too long. But the rest of those guys, if you get in their kitchen a little bit and let them know that this is going to be a dogfight, even with everything that's happened with Adrian and everything else, I think the Vikings will have a chance.
What happens to a guy like a Matt Castle, who really made his name in New England before he got his big free agent contract? Is it a big deal, a big motivator for him to go back and play the Patriots and kind of show both Brady, who was there, what he can still do, as well as Bill Belichick, or is that overrated?
There might be a bit. I think it depends on the player. Some players, that is part of it. I think for Castle, he's going to go back and be able to see some of his old teammates. I mean, when 30-40% of a team turns over year after year, there probably aren't that many guys left. But he does have familiarity with the scheme and with the defense, and I think he'll try to use that to his advantage as much as he possibly can. But then Belichick knows that he knows, and so there you go. It's the chicken or the egg thing.
Right.
But trust me, Belichick knows what he does well, knows what he does not do well, and will game plan a defense around that. So, for Castle, it's going to be a great challenge for him, and I think he's probably excited to face his old squad in that respect.
Well, obviously with Adrian Peterson out, what would you expect to see? Would it be a heavy dose of Matt Asiata out of the backfield, or might we see more of rookie Jerick McKinnon and even some of Cordero Patterson from the tailback position?
You obviously will see that. But I think you're going to seeing is a lot more Jerick McKinnon. I don't know if Adrian was around all week. I've heard reports that he wasn't. But if Adrian was there and was taking snaps all week away from the rookie, then, he might have some catching up to do over the next couple of days, going into the game. But yeah, you'll see more of Jerick McKinnon. I think Asiata has some strengths and does some things well, but I think as far as an explosive player, or a guy who can catch out of the backfield and do some unique things, I think Jerick McKinnon might be the guy that you come away saying he's a good player and was a good pick.
Well, the Vikings have long had trouble game planning for tight ends in the past game. How do you control a guy like the Patriots tight end, Rob Gronkowski?
You know what? It's funny you bring him up because I think he'd be my biggest concern. He's a mismatch no matter what. And, I think if you look at the Vikings defense and who we have where and where we might be susceptible, that might be the spot. I mean, obviously Anthony Barr has the physical size to cover someone like that, but he doesn't have the experience. And you would think that with the problems they had, a short controlled passing game would be, something that they would want to go to, and that also spells Gronkowski to me as well. So that's the matchup that concerns me.
Yeah. Well, as we kind of wind down our conversation this week, I had a couple questions for you elsewhere in the NFL besides Minnesota, and one of them was a couple of longtime marquee quarterbacks who really struggled in 2013 continued that slide in Week 1. And Pete, what I wonder is, might it be time to consider sitting down Eli Manning in New York and Tony Romo in Dallas?
Well, I didn't catch too much of the Dallas game. I saw the Giants game, and their offense was putrid. It was bad. And it's not a situation where it's all on the quarterback's shoulders. It's a lot of things around him as well. And for Tony Romo, again, not seeing the game, I don't know. I don't know if he's healthy. I mean, that back injury that he had, that's a tough thing to recover from. So I don't know if he's physically where he was a year ago. But for Eli, is it time for him to hang it up? Absolutely not. I don't think so. I think it's as much on the cast of characters around him and lack of a respectable running game. The Giants just don't have a running game that puts the fear of God in people or makes people game plan to stop it. And, so when you can't run the ball and then all of a sudden now you have a bunch of defenders just waiting for you to throw it, that's problematic, and I think that's a lot of the Giants' problem.
Well, finally tonight, Pete, we know you're kind of a high society type guy, so we have to get your advice as we plan to go out in the town this weekend. Are you ready for one of these questions?
I guess. Go ahead.
All right. This past week, Philadelphia Eagles running back LaShawn McCoy has been in the news for leaving a paltry 20-cent tip on a $62 restaurant bill. Now, he said he left the low tip. He said he left that low tip on purpose as a statement about poor service and said he'd do it again. So our question to you, Pete, is as a sophisticated man about town, can you advise the fans on what their rule of thumb should be for tipping, and what message would you send if you got bad restaurant table service?
It's funny because tipping is kind of one of those things that it seems has gotten a little bit out of control. But if you have to sit there and think of whether or not you got good service, 20% it's a guideline. I mean, they make those little calculators you can put in your pocket. I gave Hunter Goodwin, one of our tight ends, years ago, one of those things, and he was really excited because Hunter was at the time tighter than two coats of paint. I mean, he wouldn't part with $1 unless he absolutely had to. And so. I don't blame him. I mean, it's one of those things. If you get bad service, and people will take that as saying, well, he's used to probably people kissing his rear end every time he walks in a door somewhere. I don't know. I mean, everybody works hard for their money, and I guess in some ways you have to make a determination. And he felt he did not get good service, and he wanted to make a statement, and he stands by it. So, I guess in that respect, more power to him.
Well, I mean, I think everybody understands the point here. If you're serving Pete, if you do well, you're getting at least 20%. If not, you're getting the 20 cents.
No, it's a situation when you need to look at the whole thing and see. I'm sure if he's been a generous person in other areas and financially generous in other areas, which most of these guys are, then it's not a situation where he's just plain old cheap. You know what I mean? So. But, you step back and you look in the light of everything that's going on, it's a small story.
No doubt. Well, with your tipping advice now solidified, Pete, that brings a close to this week's edition of Pete Bercich's Viking Mail Call Show. And don't forget to catch Pete's in-game comments this Sunday on the Minnesota Vikings radio network call as the New England Patriots visit the Vikings at TCF Bank Stadium. And check out Pete's football website at PeteBFootball.com, or be one of the more than 12,000 people that follow him on Twitter at Pete Bercich, where Pete will keep you up to date on the breaking news involving the Adrian Peterson situation. So until next week, for Pete Bercich, I'm Tom Moore. We'll see you at 2-0 next week.